Dear God, today as this session opens, we pray that your presence will be before us and everyone who serves in the decision-making process of our city. We pray for direction which will lead our city to be strong and unified. May we continue the legacy of our founders. May we be granted this day the wisdom to make decisions which will be for the good of our city. We also pray for your special blessing on all those who are working to transform our city and make it a better place to live and work.
Amen.
Amen. Would you please recognize our nation's flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Murphy.
Here.
Councilor Nguyen.
Here.
Councilor Broderick.
Here.
Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
Councilor Laurie.
Here.
Councilor Martin.
Here.
Councilor Madonza.
Here.
Councilor Mercia. 9 present.
Thank you. Before we get started, I'd recognize Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer a moment of silence for M. Patricia Royal, a lifelong resident of the city of Lowell, who graduated from Lowell High School with the class of 1938. Following high school, Patricia furthered her education, earning a bachelor's degree in education from Bridgewater State in 1942, and later a master's degree in education from Boston University. She was also recognized for her National Science Fellowship from Harvard University in 1958. Ms. Royal was employed as an educator for her entire life. She taught for more than 40 years with the Lowell school system, including the Maury and Daly schools. Patricia's love of teaching also drew her to teach English as a second language to countless immigrants from many ethnic backgrounds striving for a better life in the United States. Patricia was a faithful communicant of St. Margaret's Church in Lowell, where she taught religious education and was a Eucharistic minister. She was a member of the retired Massachusetts Teachers Association, the League of Catholic Women, and the Poor Clare Guild. She is survived by her many cousins and friends. She will be truly missed by all those lives that she has touched. And I'd like to also, as well, offer a moment of silence in darkened chamber for William F. Nangle, Sr., member of well-known Greater Lowell family, beloved husband of Elizabeth Leahy Nangle, whom he would have celebrated their 64th wedding anniversary last Tuesday on April 17th. Bill was a person of great faith who, in addition to his family, dedicated his life to his church, to his community, and to those less fortunate. Mr. Nangle attended Lowell High School and was a graduate of the class of 1940. Mr. Nangle was a veteran of World War II and served in the United States Navy. He was a lifelong member of the Holy Name Society of St. Margaret's Parish and a 60-year member, as well as a former secretary of the parish's St. Vincent de Paul Society. He was also a proud and active member of St. Margaret's Bowling League for over 55 years. Besides his wife, Elizabeth, Bill is survived by his 3 sons, William, Joseph, and State Representative David Nangle, 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Susan, 14 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. He was also the father of the late John Nangle and grandfather of the late Matthew Nangle. He was a tremendous person, a gentleman, and a great father. Our sympathy to his family and many friends. He will be truly missed, and thank you for letting me say this. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Would you please rise in a moment of silence in darkened chambers? Thank you. This is the third special oversight meeting of this year. This meeting devoted, of course, to the city's auditor. I'll read the special meeting notice that was given last week. Notice is hereby given as required by Rule 6 of the City of Lowell City Council rules that the Lowell City Council will hold a special meeting of the Lowell City Council and Council Chambers on Tuesday, April 24th, 2012 at 6:30 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss matters pertaining to the office of the City Auditor, including but not necessarily limited to the report from the Powers and Sullivan regarding the FY 2011 management letter, contract of services, 2, goals and objectives for FY 2013, 3, the discussion regarding monthly reports pursuant to Section 44 of the city's charter, and 4, a report of the Rules Subcommittee. At this point, I'll turn it over to Madam Auditor.
Good evening. I don't know how you would like to run this, if you'd like me to go through each and every point in the management letter, or if you would like an overview from the auditor first, or if you would just like to ask questions. It's really up to you.
I'd suggest a brief summary of
Very
the
good.
letter, and then we can get into questions.
You have in front of you the 2011 management letter prepared by Powers and Sullivan. As you can see, we've made and we continue to make significant progress in almost every area. In 2010, we had a total of 16 issues listed in the report, but during 10 and 11, we successfully resolved 6 of those issues. The current year lists 11 issues, but 4 of those have already been resolved in 2011, and we fully expect to remove the material weakness and 2 more other issues for the 2012 report. I'm also pleased to announce that the report that cash are reconciled monthly, and we're consistently working on enhancing all operations by using this document as a management tool. So, in a nutshell, in 2010, we had 16 issues. 6 were gone by 11. 11 in this year, we have the 1 new one, and that's the tailings, and that's because we now have cash reconciled. And 4 of those we've already resolved, 3 should be resolved by next year, and 4 we're currently working on. The second page shows the breakdown on where we've been since 2005 through 2011. As you can see, the one large nut that was left to crack is the internal controls over cash. That has been done. We fully anticipate 2012, this will be removed from the audit management letter completely. If we go through one at a time, the material weakness over cash, like I said, that's been reconciled. We've done it all the way through to March has been entered in the new cash control system. The outstanding checks, we're working on. We're working on that along with the tailings, because they come hand in hand. Individual fund reconciliations, that we anticipate it's gonna take 1 more year to actually rectify, because now that we have overall cash reconciled, we're doing the 1 fund at a time. Fixed assets, another one we're just working on, because we have it down pat in adding new assets to the audit. We have a problem in getting rid of assets. What happens is a department might dispose of something and not report it to the purchasing agent. When we do it through the purchasing agent, we capture that information. When departments just trash stuff, we don't. So we're working on that. Fraud risk assessment, that has been considered resolved. And within our new contract with Powers and Sullivan, they're going to completely review 2 departments for cash for next year. So that'll help with all our fraud risk and our cash controls. Outstanding receivables, We've worked on motor vehicle, we've worked on some real estate and personal property. In 2010, we focused on water and personal property, and 412, we are focusing on tax title properties, as we all know. Deposit and investment policy, that's been resolved. You voted in 2011 for the new policy. The review of the functions of the bank accounts have been resolved. We've actually closed a lot of accounts, and we're closing some as we speak. The retirement cash reconciliation, that's actually been resolved with the new treasurer. GASB 54, that's been resolved. That was basically just a name change and some fund names. And for the new, the tailings account, that should be resolved in 2012. We've already removed all the old tailings, and we plan on May of every year putting in all the new tailings work, which are all the outstanding checks. That's the brief review of the entire report.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Auditor Cheryl. What is fraud risk assessment? What does that mean? What is that?
What we're trying to do is minimize our risk. All the cash controls that we've put in place, all the new cash receipts, everything that we do is trying to minimize our exposure to fraud and theft.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The audit itself gets submitted to the Department of Revenue, is that correct?
In December? Yes.
So, and was there an opinion given with the audit itself?
Just on the material weakness. Was there an opinion in what was given to Department of Revenue?
Department of Revenue receives the financial
They will
statements,
get
the
this.
management letter, and
If you
the
could
federal award
just
report.
use
they get
your-
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The Department of Revenue receives 3 reports, which was the financial statements, the management letter, and also there's a report on federal awards. They get a copy of all 3 of those reports.
All right, and the audit itself, is it, I think there's a term of art that's used in there, but free from material misstatement, is that?
The audit itself is not impacted by this material weakness because in the end, the balance sheet was able to be reasonably attested to, and the numbers, the ending balances were, in our opinion, significantly accurate. So you don't have to qualify your opinion if you feel that the numbers as they're being presented, both in a form and also the accuracy, is okay. So it was an unqualified opinion, which is the best opinion.
Right, so I mean, that's where I'm driving. It was a clean opinion
Clean
to the
opinion.
Department of Revenue, and they don't have any issues with the audit itself.
That's
I
correct.
mean, obviously, I was on the Finance Subcommittee for a number of years, and we go through this every year, and it's good to see that there's been progress made in a number of issues, but not surprising in an operation our size to have issues that need to be addressed. So I'd have more concern if we had a qualified opinion in some way, but that's not the case. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Broderick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the auditor. You mentioned a number of these are resolved. Resolved meaning we fixed them and they've been considered resolved by Powers and Sullivan? So they've been signed off on or checked off as done? Okay. Could I just ask you, because I was trying to write this down just to get the overview, and I got a little bit confused here. 2010, we had 16 issues, solved 6. Right, that showed on the report, correct. 6 was solved, so in 2011, we had 10, right?
We added one new one, the tailings.
Plus tailings, okay. All right. And then this year,
Actually, with the 11, 4 of those have already been resolved.
okay,
3 should be resolved by next year. And 4 we're working on.
okay. And the 4 that we're working on, thank you, that breaks it down for me, because I was trying to write these numbers down and the math wasn't working out for me. Yeah, now it makes sense. Thank you. That That's good progress. So I want to state that, thank you for your work, and Powers and Sullivan, thank you for the work you do for us as well. You told us which four we're working on. What do you anticipate for those in terms of resolving those? A year, 2 years, 4 years? I mean, are these long-term problems?
The only one that I see actually is kind of longer term would be the fixed assets.
Okay. And that's a matter of coming up with a new process for the departments to report when they dispose of assets, essentially?
Correct.
What kind of assets?
Old trucks, some of them they junk, they pull apart for spare parts to fix the other trucks, and I don't get notification that that truck itself is gone.
Okay, we're not talking about printers and
No,
computer
no,
monitors,
no,
we're talking, okay.
No.
Okay, so you anticipate that could be a couple of years? I mean, that's something that we're working on with the city staff program in terms of controlling these things?
More, not really city stat.
Yeah.
More like an extension of the work order system.
More like what?
More like an extension of the work order system,
Okay,
you know?
all right. Thank you, and this is good progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was looking at the report, and I want to congratulate you on the progress you have made. I'm looking at the staffing in the office day to day, and you're down a couple employees. Has that had any effect on the day-to-day operations? Presently, we've changed the system on how we control cash in the other offices. It's been a long time since I've dealt with the auditor's office, but they used to have the warrants come in on payroll. And
Yes, we still do.
has that affected the operation day-to-day at all, or?
Like everyone else, we're doing more with less.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be as efficient as we can and use technology where we can to make us more efficient and effective.
But we can, looking at the changes we've made over the past 12 months, or at least the 3 that I've been here, it's sufficient to do the cash and the warrants and keep the day-to-day going.
It's the job.
Just a little follow-up on Councilor Broderick's questions on the inventory in the city. Have we done anything to really look at the inventory by department on what we have?
Well, there was a baseline done before I got here that actually inventoried all the buildings and all the streets, and that doesn't change. It's just basically, if we owned a printer and they traded it in for another printer, I didn't get the record that we traded it in. So it's keeping track in that way. It's not like necessarily, okay, we had 5 printers. Well, we still have 5 printers, but they're not the same 5 printers as we had before.
That's what I was looking at, is there a way down the line, and, I mean, it's probably not a high item to do right now, but how we can control that down the line. And finally, looking at the number of checks, I know this has been an issue, and as the city managers negotiated with the different unions to go to a paperless payroll, how much for savings do you anticipate down the road?
You know, that's really hard to tell, because I don't know when we can go paperless. It means that everyone would have a sign-in, an email address. And right now, everybody doesn't have an email address. I think the greater savings will be paying every other week. Because right now, with my department, it's a crash and burn every week.
Right.
You know, we have to cut checks, make all the changes, put the payroll sheets back out there, and do it again next week. That's where I see a greater savings, in accuracy and efficiency.
It's been a long time since I worked out of treasurer's office, probably over almost 40 years. And unfortunately, at different times here, the warrants would come in, especially around payroll time, and they'd be running late. And that was just a concern I had. Thank you.
I don't think we've run late. Everybody's
that's as
gotten
I said.
paid, or you would have heard.
As I said 30, I was saying 30 years ago. And, but looking at the staffing needs and the amount of work coming into the city, it was just a question I did have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Counselor. Any Any further discussion? Counselor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could you tell me I don't know who you are. Oh,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. My name is Dick Sullivan. I'm a partner at the firm of Powers and Sullivan,
Okay,
and I'm the engagement partner to the city of Lowell.
okay, thanks. I've only known you for a few months, but you've been very responsive to any requests for information that I've wanted. The audit itself, is there a reason why we don't put it on the website? There are other communities, Boston is one, puts their entire audit on the website.
We can do that, now that I do have a website. The mayor had suggested that I open up the website, and I've put in the quarterly reports, and I can put the audit report right on there.
Okay,
Consider it done.
okay. And when I was speaking to you this week, you had told me that you signed a 3-year contract with Powers and Sullivan
Correct.
for fiscal years, what fiscal years? 12, 13, 14?
13, 14.
Okay. Your term, you have a 4-year term and a 4-year
Oh, I
contract with
don't.
the city?
I have a 3-year term.
I believe it's 4 years.
I have a 3-year term.
I'm pretty sure that if you look at it, it's a 4-year term.
I'm on my second 3-year term.
Okay. I'll show it to you.
I have
All
my
right.
contract. It's,
Okay. You may have a 3-year contract, but you had a 4-year term. That's what was voted on. But anyways, that's beside the point. That doesn't matter. Your term will run out in December of 2013, when this council expires.
I believe it expires in 2012, Counselor.
I think it's 2013. Quite sure it's December 2013. Okay. Well, if it's 2012, that makes it probably even worse. That would mean that you've signed a 3-year contract with an auditing firm, an outside auditing firm, for time that's beyond your term. But what is the authority that allows you to do that without coming to the council? How does that, have you done that before? Did you do that when you were on your, years ago? And how is it that you're able to do that?
A couple of ways, one of which is the city ordinances require that I keep a set of accounts. The city ordinances require that I give an annual report every year. That is the audit. As a matter of fact, my job description, when I applied for this job, I have copies of it, includes will choose the auditor.
Okay.
Actually, the auditor was chosen by my predecessor.
Well, you
It's been-
told me you signed a 3-year contract in February.
Life
Of
is
this year.
longer than 6 years.
Excuse me?
I signed, this is my second contract. When I got here, a contract had already been signed by my predecessor
Right,
for 3 years.
okay.
So it's always been in the city of Lowell, the auditor has picked the auditor.
Okay,
The
so,
auditor has picked the auditor. The outside auditor.
so the reason that you felt comfortable signing a 3-year contract without council approval or approval from anybody else is just because...
It's always been done.
That's the way it's been done?
Correct.
And that's the way you did it before?
Correct.
Okay. You know that the Commonwealth's Department of Revenue cautions having the financial people in any community be involved in the selection of an outside audit. That would be you, that would be Mr. Moses, and that would be other people, and that they recommend that it be done by the city council and by the finance committee if it was in a town.
I don't believe there's an ordinance in place to do that right now.
Well, there doesn't really need to be an ordinance in place. I guess what my point is... Are you set? What my point is why would it be that... Do you think it's a good idea for you to be signing a 3-year contract with an outside auditing firm without any council approval?
because that's the way it's always been done. The council hasn't made any changes.
Okay.
I discussed the auditors last November, saying that I was going to extend it so that they will do 2 departments, and nothing was said to me about it at that point in time.
Well, I mean, I've only been on this council since January, but I was on the
Right.
council in February, but I had no idea that you were signing a contract in February for 3 fiscal years. I don't remember getting a notice of that or hearing about it at all. When you selected Powers and Sullivan, was that because they've been the ones that have done the audit for the city for some time?
Correct, and they're doing a wonderful job.
Yeah, and they've done it for probably 10 or 15 years?
I would say about.
Maybe longer than that. Do you think that would be prudent to try somebody else just to get a fresh set of eyes on the books?
If that's the choice of the council and they want to.
Well, it can't be the
I mean,
choice of the
can't
council
now.
right
This-
now,
well,
can it?
that's what I
Because-
mean. If you want to actually do something about changing and putting in place an ordinance,
Okay.
I'm
Do you
fine
think
with
that
that.
do you think that we could get a copy of the contract that you signed with Powers and
Sure.
Sullivan? Do you know how much the contract is for in every year?
yes, 94,000.
94,000?
Correct. They increased it by 5,000 so that they'll go into the departments like,
So for all 3 years, it's 94,000?
correct.
Okay. Okay, so when do you think we can get a copy of that? Can we get that for the next council meeting?
Sure.
Okay, all right. I don't really have any questions on the audit, just because the stuff was just placed on my desk tonight, so I didn't have the luxury of being able to look over this stuff, but probably at some time in the future, I'll have motions at regular meetings about it.
Sure.
But, I would like to end until we get to number 4, just by saying that, that I have found you to be cooperative and forthcoming with information, and I didn't want for this to turn into a adversarial conversation. I just think that, I don't think it's proper for you to be signing a 3-year contract without council approval. That's my opinion.
And I just want to say that I did it based on my
Yeah.
job
I
description
understand.
and.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie.
Just to follow up on Councilor Kennedy, before you post the audits online, could you bring them to the council? It appears the city manager's found himself in a little bit of a tussle in the city about going into the neighborhoods with what some people view as the budget. And,
You already have the financial audit. You
Okay.
have the management letter. The only thing that you're missing is the,
I'm just asking,
The
before you
federal.
put anything online, could the council have the copy first?
sure.
Okay, that's all. And, Mr. Sullivan, just out of curiosity, again, a follow-up on Councilor Kennedy, your company, how many cities and towns do you do on a continual basis?
We audit 54 cities and towns. They range in size from the city of Lowell, city of Springfield, Somerville, Peabody, to smaller towns like Raleigh, Groveland. We go from the islands in Nantucket out to the western part of the state at like Springfield, Agawam. We've been doing this for 21 years. It's our core business. It's a business actually that we've found a niche for that we're very, very comfortable with. I would suggest that about 98% of our revenues are derived from the audits and also supporting, from a consulting standpoint, municipalities in the state.
Is it unusual for an auditing company to stay with a town consistently, or?
No, it's not unusual. I mean, there are times when competitive bids are put out. Knock on wood, we've been very fortunate to retain a number of those. In situations where our long-term clients may have said, well, we'd really like maybe a fresh set of eyes. We have 5 partners, and give you an instance, the communities like Andover and Brookline, of which I am now the engagement partner, had a partner on there for 6, 7, 8 years prior to that. It's a pretty standard thing to do in the SEC world, where they're required to not necessarily change firms, but to change partners every 5 years. And if our client, obviously, the only way we can give them a new set of eyes and be the same firm is to have another engagement partner involved. And that's been a successful alternative for a number of our clients.
I thought it was a good point by Councilor Kennedy, and I was just trying to, and I'm new to this, trying to see what other towns doing and how the auditing firm. And what I was talking about was, before you post it, there's been a little controversy, the manager's been on vacation, that he goes into the neighborhood groups with the budget before we actually get it. And that's what I was talking about. You know, we see any audits first. Thank you.
If I may just weigh in.
Mr. Manager.
Because I can't help it. I don't actually go out with the budget. I meet with the neighborhood groups two to three times a year with various issues, including city finances, and generally that's the same information I've already provided to the council in regular reports. It's never, the budget is only submitted to the council.
You were on vacation, I stuck up for you on the radio.
I appreciate that, Councilor. I need all the help I can get.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the city auditor's auditor. If I could, Mr. Sullivan, now, I know you've been here many, many years, because I remember all that far back. I know sometimes people doubt that, but I do. And now, you were here, let's say, last year, and you do an audit and present it to the city. How often, like once a year, a report, Powers and Sullivan report, you give a booklet of different findings, and how often do you do that?
For each client,
For us, the city of, I don't,
it's always dated around, based on the June 30th fiscal year end. And everything that, all the work that we do, both before and after that date, results in the three reports that you have. So I guess the answer to your question is, in terms of a documented management letter, a documented schedule of federal awards, and obviously the financial statements, that's an annual thing. It occurs once per
once a
fiscal
year.
year.
So I'm assuming last year, you might have did an audit of this city hall and went to different departments, right?
Yes.
And did you have an occasion to go to the treasurer's office?
We spent an enormous time in the treasurer's office.
And how about the city clerk's office? Would you have an occasion to go to the city clerk's office?
We had visited the city clerk's office in earlier years, but hadn't visited within the last 3 years.
So
What you do is we call it cycling. We cycle departments, and you might go and visit a particular area and watch the operations, whether they be cash collections. And the city clerk's office was not in that, let's just say, scope of audit planning as part of the 2011 audit.
The reason I'm asking that is because there was a lot of discrepancies taking place in the city clerk's office. And I was wondering, when I see an auditor do a report, I thought you did every department,
It would be cost prohibitive to
Okay.
do that because of the enormity of the operations.
Well, what I'm trying to do is to prove to the public that the only way we would have probably known of the discrepancies was if we had an audit or something that was coming to us that we could look at and see the deficiencies that were there. And you did not provide that to us because you didn't go there in the last 3 years, so we would have had no way of knowing that.
That's a
And
good
for
statement.
example, I say that for example because I remember some years ago when you went to the police department, and I distinctly remember that ticket books were not numbered, so there was no sequence of numbers to know that, number 745 out of the ticket book is missing. Where is it? Did they issue a ticket? Did they have a ticket? Did they throw it away? Something like that. Therefore, I thought that in the city clerk's office, where they deal with money too, that you would have taken upon investigating or auditing that department to say that, gee, you're giving out receipts, but there's no numbers on this receipt. So that never transpired. And I want the public to know that that would have been one means of alerting this council as to what was wrong. There was problems there, and we would have taken it upon ourselves, not the city manager, because he's not responsible for that department. but it was not a means by which we could have been alerted. So I want that specifically clear, to know that there's none of us councilors that knew firsthand of any discrepancies in that department, and that's where I'm going with this, so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mayor. I too pleased to see a progress in terms of the city auditor of the issues that has been resolved. And I'm also pleased to see that you have submitted to the Department of Revenue and got a clean review on this. I do have a question for Mr. Sullivan. You were hired by our city auditor in what year?
The first year that we did it, the work, I believe, I sat down with the city manager at the time and the city auditor at the time. And I'm going to suggest it was 1994 or 5.
Oh, that's a long time. I noticed that just looking at the 2005, there's almost half of the issue or listed here is unresolved, listed as unresolved. What do you attribute that to?
If I'm looking at the same
He's
thing,
looking at
The
the
second
switches,
page of
basically,
the
yeah.
city auditor report.
He's looking at this 5.
so we're starting in 2005,
Yes, sir.
and we're going from left to right.
Yes, sir.
And what I'm seeing in that left to right progression is that instances or highlights of the comments that were put in the management letter in '05 and let's say '06 subsequently were resolved and the recommendations were implemented from 2007 through 2011. I guess maybe I'm not sure I understand your question.
No, because I noticed that there's a lot of item listed, and 2005 is listed as unresolved, and then you go carry on to, some of them carry on to 2006.
That's because management fixed the problem.
Were you under the, would you hire under the other, the previous auditor? Is that at the time, city?
I don't remember actually who the auditor was. It might have been Mr. Kennedy, if I remember. Yeah, but I guess the answer would be yes.
And the term that you hire right now is, the contract will be a 3-year contract?
Usually they're 3-year contracts, and one of the reasons for that is to smooth out, you could, if it was a 1-year contract, theoretically the prices would be higher, and we just try to smooth things out. The other thing we try to do always for all our clients is to give them a fixed budget for a 3-year period. Like, for instance, I'll give you the prior 3-year period. The city received over 50% more in federal grants due to ARRA money in fiscal 2010 and fiscal 2011. We spent at least 150 hours of extra time, and we didn't ask for any increase in price related to that. That was an unforeseen thing when that contract was first entered into. So our policy, our business policy, is to try to provide our clients with fixed price, with the best crystal ball we have at the time, so that if things go on, Powers and Sullivan, unless it's a real large item, absorbs any additional cost of providing the service.
Approximately how many hours do you spend, let's say, in average all those years?
984 hours
984 hours?
last year.
Are those the average hour you have spent?
There's been actually, in some of the early years, when cash got better this year because, first of all, the efforts of both the Treasury Office and the Controller's Office, Auditor's Office, as well as having an outside contractor come in. Cash was better this year, but we've actually had a lot more hours. This happened to be what I would call the type of year it should have been.
Hearing Councilor Kennedy comment on the cooperations that the current city auditor have in terms of respond to Councilor Kennedy, how would you rate our current city auditor?
We like working with Ms. Wright. She understands the audit process. She understands both internally on her side of the desk, she understands what has to be done, the type of elements of control that are needed to get what she gets done, and the timeliness of what needs to be reported. as an auditor, we have a real sense of urgency to try to get our work done as efficiently and accurately as possible. The longer it takes us to do the work, on a fixed price contract, the less money we make. And it also is indicative, if it takes us longer to do our work, it's indicative of management not knowing what they're doing as well as they should, and providing us what I call an audit package. So from my side of the table, I find Ms. Wright's efforts to be very, very good. And if I was on your side of the desk, I would think the same thing too.
With her being as good as she is, as you said, would that make your job easier? And maybe also this year may not be 984 hours, maybe less than that?
Possibly.
Would the contract then can be renewed, renegotiated to a lesser price?
No,
Thank you, sir.
no.
Good shot.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie.
Give it a try.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following up on Councilor Noon, I think you said Mr. Sullivan, your firm does 64 cities and towns in
I
Massachusetts?
think it was 54, but that's all right.
54.
And you know what, it's probably a couple extra. We've been very fortunate this year in picking up some clients.
Contracts. How would you rate the city of Lowell compared to other, in this department, against other communities? I don't see that here on any of the reports.
Well, that's the nature of that document. It doesn't say the things that are going good. It's critical in nature. I guess I'd like to answer this in a couple of areas. First of all, from a financial perspective, particularly in terms of what I've seen in terms of the balance sheet, the management of your budget with absolutely no reserves from what I can see from my perspective, the pressures of the economy, the pressures of the fact that I think the state has taken away, 20% of your state aid, give or take, maybe I'm less than that, but it's significant in dollars. The part that I've been impressed by is that from a financial perspective, and somebody who's analyzing these numbers, they have seen a trend in the city of Lowell, like a Moody's or an S&P I'm talking about. They should be seeing, and I know they have, seen a trend in the city of Lowell where there's been a stabilization of your inflows and outflows. Structurally, I think you're as sound as you can be, meaning that you have a good proportion and there's a linear progression of both your revenues and your expenses. I don't always see that in communities because they constantly have to dip into their reserves to make ends meet. So I like the way you're structurally set from a budget standpoint. You also spend $52 million in federal grants. Some of these grants have a lot of compliance associated with the feds in terms of what we call the A133 audit. You don't have any findings related to the administration of those grants, so I think that's a plus on that side too. It's a balance. I mean, as an auditor, I don't just look at the numbers, I kind of pay attention to what I see happening in a community itself. And, I live in a budding town next door in Tewksbury, and from my side of the fence, I see a community that's been doing a lot better over the last 5 to 8 years than some of my peers, some of the peer communities around here. So from a financial perspective, I would rate your city very well in terms of the people that you're doing the work, the way they go about it, and my one time a year coming in and seeing what I think happened, I like what I see.
And for some self-criticism on this side of the table, do you have any suggestions for the council of maybe something we don't see, something we should be looking at?
I guess the thing
As an auditor.
the thing that I see when you talk about number 4, and I've heard it mentioned a couple of times about the auditor providing some reasonable information and the kind of being a little, let's call it transparency. If I'm on your side of the desk again, that's what I would want, and what I see happening on this side is that's what you're getting.
Okay.
I think that's about as fair of a process as you could ask for. And just going back to one thing, Cheryl, and I don't want to make it more of it, but she is doing a lot with less. Because I've seen, been with as long as we've been with this organization and have you as a client, being down 2 staff people is a lot for a $300 million operation.
Right. That was my first question when looking at the staffing. day to day, making sure that the city can go on, and I did commend the auditor for that. But I just want your opinion on how we stand as a city in your eyes, knowing you do 54, say, communities.
You're managing yourself very well.
Okay.
You manage yourself very well. I mean, I know that you're not taxing at the top limit that you can tax at. That's a plus. There's not a lot of people that are doing that. In fact, the rating agents like to see you taxed at the limit that you can go. And you've worked through that. You know, when I look at the ratio of reserves you have, literally you have none when it really gets down to it. You have some pockets of money, but in the big scheme of things, it's less than 1% of your overall reserves. But each year, you're able to maintain that same level. I know there's a willingness right now with the council to try to build those reserves, and I support that effort. I think that's something that has to happen. There's a number out there that's thrown about by the GFOA. It's a 5% number for reserves. And once you get to that, that allows you some flexibility in dealing with one-time events that can occur.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought we were supposed to, the rule would be to put 15% of what your budget is into the reserves. Is it 5%?
5 to 10.
You didn't say 15,
I
did
never
you?
said 15.
I thought I heard you. Well, we didn't say 20 years.
Maybe
for the-
you heard me say 5 to 10, and you added 5 and 10. But no, it's 5 to 10 is the rule of thumb.
Could we ever
You
use,
probably, the number was 15 million, probably 15 to 30
Oh,
million.
that
So
could
that's
be.
a 5 to,
That could be.
that's a 5 to 10%.
15 million?
That's what we adopted as the
And
goals.
how close are we to that?
We're about
Which-
7 something right now. We'd like to get it up to that 15. That's
Oh, you
that's
mean million.
including
You mean million?
right.
7 million, so 2.5%.
There you are,
There,
there
that's
you are, okay. And could you ever use free cash to offset the tax rate?
Communities do. Communities do.
So we could, right?
But,
And you're a professional, aren't you?
well, the fact that you can doesn't mean you should. And that's the only
But
thing I
you
would
can,
suggest.
but you can, right?
We, from my perspective, and some of the communities I think have good policies, free cash should be used for kind of like one-time items, meaning like you might want to use it to build up the reserves to a certain level. You might earmark it for pay-as-you-go capital projects. And also, some folks are actually paying close attention to this OPEB liability, which is growing, and they're trying to earmark potentially some of their money for that. When
So
I
you
talked
wouldn't-
earlier about that structural budget, that means a really good matching of your expenditures with current revenues. So if you end up having a surplus and you begin using that surplus to pay for current year expenditures, you've lost the match, and it becomes what we call a structural deficit. So the idea behind the budgeting process is only the monies that are coming in the current year should be used for the expenditures going out in that year.
So you would, although very slightly could use the free cash, you would rule against it?
It would be my recommendation not to
Okay,
go in that direction.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, just the auditor mentioned something that I did want to raise at some point in time, and I just thought it was a good opportunity. I think we've talked about reserves a number of occasions here and the use of free cash, but he mentioned something that I think we raised a couple of weeks ago, the OPEB liability. We have an enormous post-employment benefit liability of some $450 million. We really should start putting aside money for that. Communities are doing more and more communities are doing that. That's the retiree health insurance. We have a great opportunity probably coming up in the next year or so to at least put a down payment on that liability with the closeout of the health insurance trust fund, which we see probably happening in a year or so. We don't know how much is going to be there, but that would be a great down payment on that liability.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item number 1? Councilor Elliott.
Thank you. Mr. Powers, have you had an opportunity to look at the Melanson and Heath report that was done on the cash reconciliation?
The actual written report, no, but we used their work papers as part of the audit documentation for our audit of cash.
Well, and the reason why I asked that is, year after year, it's cited as a weakness in your report. So I'm curious why you wouldn't take a read at that to identify what the problem is and how to solve it.
I'm not sure I understand the question, Counselor. The resolution of the finding of the issue that existed as of June 30th, 2011 audit will be incorporated into our observations as part of our fiscal 12 audit. And, the written documentation that Melanson provided, which I would consider to be policies, procedures. So we will assess those as part of our FY12 audit, but I'm not sure that they really should have influenced the FY11 audit and the management letter.
Creating the treasurer's book from scratch, just picking a date, is that the only solution in your opinion? And I guess my concern is, why has this lingered for such a length of time? Why was it carried over and over to the point where we had to recreate things because we had no other alternative, because it was too much of a mess, quite frankly. So, I mean, what can you do as an auditor other than identify this and we bring it up as a council to prevent something like this in some area from happening again? I mean, I'm looking at the last report. There was a difference of, and there's no date on this, so I'm not sure exactly when it was, but it's a report from the auditor saying there was still a difference of about $271,874. We haven't received any additional information. Or is there a final report from Melanson and Heath, Madam Auditor, that will give us a complete, comprehensive answer to what took place and what the solution was?
What do you mean, what took place? The variance is still approximately 271,000, and that's the good thing. And we're reconciled through December with Melanson and Heath, and all the activity's been entered by the treasurer's office through March, so we're still at 271, so it's somewhere in the old outstanding checks.
So what are we doing
It's to the
about
good.
that? We think it's to the, we don't know, because
We
you
know it's to the good.
just drew a line at some point and said, look, we just have to pick one point and then move from here on out. So, I mean, you can say that, but you don't know that until you validate it. How do you know that's for sure that it's to the good?
We're waiting for the year, that's why. We're waiting for the year to validate it.
So you haven't, why are you waiting, why are we waiting for that particular point in time, for this 271, to look at those old
Make sure that
checks?
it's consistently the variance for a full year before we close it to fund balance.
Okay.
In order for Melanson and Heath to go back to the beginning of time to recreate the cash book would have been cost prohibitive. So they had to, in fact, draw a line in the sand.
How come it got to this point? I guess that's why I can't get over. Why was it, why did it just continue year after year after year after year?
I can only tell you from January 1st, 2007, but this was here long before that the cash book went awry.
So when you get here in 07, it was identified in a report, but
Yes, it was still unresolved.
how come we didn't take some action then? And I'm not pointing fingers, I just want to know why all of a sudden we decided to. And I know it's because we brought it up here.
Well, we all of a sudden decided to because David McGurl was just about where we needed to get and unfortunately was killed along with all the work papers that were lost at that point in time. So we had to do something. We had to do something fast. It was the end of the fiscal year. So the only thing we could do was bring in Melanson and Heath to reconstruct as best they could all the work papers to reconcile the cash.
What year was that?
Last year,
Okay, so before that, it was clearly known, and nobody knew what that variance was? Nobody had any idea that it was
the
$250,000?
treasurer's office was working on it.
Well, isn't that also your responsibility?
I cannot reconcile that part of the ledger. They're reconciling, I do the general ledger. All the transactions go through my general ledger, which is solid, has been proven solid. The Treasury, what they do is look at, they kind of translate between the bank statements and what actually goes through. So they reconcile the bank statements and all the the outstanding checks. I don't touch checks at all, other than issuing them.
It's just unnerving when we see almost $250,000 in unaccounted funds, whether you say it's to the good or it's not to the good. Until that's completely reconciled, nobody knows. And that is my concern, has been cited time and time, year after year. So, and I know at I had asked to get a copy of the report to the new members of that Melanson and Heath. And I'm wondering if they got a copy of it, because that's important for them to know. So they didn't get a copy of it?
I thought you got a copy of
I think everyone
Sid
was-
and Heath's
Okay.
report. I gave it to the new counselors.
I just want to ask, I just got another note. Mr. Powers, there was a discussion about the Department of Revenue. Is it every community required to submit an annual audit to the Department of Revenue? Or is it just a recap sheet and?
No, every community that has an audit gets a copy is sent to the Department of Revenue, the ESC, and also the State Auditor's Office.
Right, but they don't issue an opinion one way or the other on the audit, correct? I mean, as long as your recap sheet, that's really what the state's requirement is.
No, the state's requirement is to receive the audits. I mean, the recap sheet is a whole different process of, establishing the tax rate. And that's parallel, but definitely a separate process.
Okay, I guess my concern is in 2010, you note in a material weakness over controls of cash again. And I just want to read it because it's written. All reconciling of items may not appear to be material to the financial position of the city. It may obscure significant but offsetting items, bank errors, and improperly recorded transactions. That would be cause for an investigation if items were apparent. I mean, that's kind of a significant statement to me. So that's why I raised the issue of the reconciliation, because it's pretty strongly worded language, and you cite it. And again, 2010, same thing comes up, 2011. Where are we with monthly reconciliation? Can you tell me the status of
I already said,
reconciliations?
all the way through March.
All the way through March, we're reconciled? Okay. I know Councilor Mercier asked about risk assessment. What exactly, can you tell me exactly what is being done? Because there is a recommendation. Have we followed the recommendation, and we in the process of going from office to office to
Yes,
evaluate?
yes. And I'm giving you quarterly reports on what I'm doing.
Okay. Can you give me, I know that there's been a lot of attention on the clerk's office, but some of the other offices that
I'm
also accept cash, or?
going to read the third quarter cash controls review I gave you April 4th. During February 18, city departments purchased new cash receipt books that included the department name, address, and city seal. Attached, please find a copy of one of the proofs and a sample from one of the generic books. I chose the following departments to review for the third quarter: the city clerk's, cemetery, health department, inspectional services, and school lunch, and found no irregularities in any of their receipts. The city treasurer and I met with Jay Lang from the school department to review the school lunch program procedures and to confirm their daily receipt process. These receipts are independently verified by not only the school personnel, but by the Aramark Company, utilizing reports from the point-to-sale control cards that are issued to each student. I found no issues with the test sample. I've also reviewed the audit reports the school has had prepared for the 2 student activity funds and the 2011 school state end-of-year report, and they were all without findings. I am happy to report that Powers and Sullivan, our independent auditors, have agreed to include the complete cash control review of 2 or 3 departments each year to further ensure our cash controls are working properly.
Thank you. So I just one other question following up on Councilor Kennedy. Is there a requirement that we go out for solicitation for audit firms?
No,
There's no, is that one of those exempt
it's
activities?
outside of 30B.
Okay. Did you do that? You didn't do it this time? Did you do any solicitation? Did we,
No, I
how did you
didn't.
negotiate the
I
contract?
negotiated with the auditors to include the 2 or 3 departments that we discussed in November.
So you just negotiated the contract? There wasn't any comparison at all whatsoever?
No. That's the way it's
I mean,
been done here.
as an auditor, wouldn't you think that that would be the best thing to do? I mean, we have procurement regulations that we have to solicit bids for everything, for everything.
This is outside of 30B, Counselor.
Madam Auditor, I know, I just understand that, but that doesn't mean that we can't, doesn't mean that you cannot do it. I mean, we don't need an ordinance to tell you to go solicit bids to get the best price for people, I don't think. So I understand it's outside 30B. That was my first question,
Right.
and I was pretty sure that was one of the services. But considering we have to bid so many things, doesn't it make sense to get the best price? And Mr. Powers' company will be the best, but how do we know that?
I would suggest that the council wants to form an audit within the audit subcommittee.
Well,
for
we
the
can't
next
now because there's a
for the
3-year
next
contract.
contract, and...
In 3 years?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item number 1? Councilor Kennedy.
Just to follow up on what Councilor Elliott was saying about the money in the treasurers, and I think we went over this at a prior meeting, but nevertheless, you've identified $271,000.
Correct.
And the plan is to wait until the end of the fiscal year and see if that number stays the same.
Yes.
And then if it does, what will that mean?
We'll close it down to fund balance.
Okay. And we are 271 to the good, right?
Correct.
It's not, okay.
Correct.
So if on June 30th, the 271,000 is still there, then the 271,000 would become free cash.
Part of the calculation, yes.
Okay. And the audits for the next 3 years will be, you pick out 3 departments every year. You said there was a cycle. Okay. Do you have have you already identified the 3 departments for FY 12?
That's something I'll sit down with the city auditor and go over as part of the audit plan.
Okay. And do you do that every year?
Yes.
Okay. You said that there was sort of a system or a cycle. So do you have an idea of what how is that going to be decided?
Well, I think it would be decided because it's basically been put as from a standpoint of us being directed into a certain area. It'll be decided based on, I think, risk associated with the actual environment that the activity is taking place. There could be some things happen during the year that have caused the city auditor to want to take a closer look just because. And then there might be just volume issues, meaning the size of the.
What is just because? What is just because
Well,
what?
let's say, for instance, a particular department is not making timely turnovers. Like if you're supposed to make them weekly, they're not happening weekly. They may be happening bi-weekly, whatever. There could be for whatever reason, somebody could make a phone call or send an email to make the city auditor aware of something that we want to take a look at. These are all that's what I meant by that.
Okay. What were the 3 departments that you did in FY 11?
I can't recall, sir.
Okay. Okay. I guess that's it. Just to go back to 30B just allows for no bid. And so in selecting a CPA, it doesn't have to be done within 30B. That's all it does.
Correct.
There's nothing, and there's no other statute that gives you authority to sign a 3-year contract, is my point. And I would think, if I was in your position, that if I was gonna sign a 3-year contract at $100,000 a year for 3 years, and I'm not saying that's exorbitant, and I'm not saying that Powers and Sullivan isn't a good choice. All I'm saying is, if I was gonna sign a 3-year contract, on my own, I would want to come into this council just for confirmation before I went ahead and did that. The way it is now, because the contract's already signed, the only way that the city council could do anything about it would be to cut the money out of the budget to pay for the contract. But then we'd have to restore money at some point in order to get an audit done. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Broderick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To put things in perspective here, I understand the concern that we're going over and over and over with the same firm here, but in not necessarily defense of the auditor here, but keep things in perspective a little bit, this has been the ongoing practice that the council has allowed. We haven't all been on here for 50 years or 40 years, but it's gone on. We've all known about it. I understand some people are new and haven't been aware of it, but this has been the practice. And is it pointed out now that it's maybe not the best practice because of some of the issues that have come up, that again, were going on for decades, over 1 decade, multiple decades? You know, I think we need to keep things in perspective and not necessarily shoot the messenger. Would it be a better practice to get bids and send it out for bid, even though you don't have to? I would suggest it probably is. You know, it was in the job description. I pulled it up on my phone. And, you know, so I understand how we got where we are. I think it's loud and clear that we don't want to continue that way, and maybe it's not the best way to do it. But I don't think we should send a message that, you know, somehow that you're gone against our wishes and that you've done things that shouldn't have been done. And you know, these are things that are being brought to light now. And if it had been brought up a year or 2 or 3 ago or 15 years ago, probably wouldn't have been happening now. So I just felt the need to say that, you know, I understand how we got here, and I don't think necessarily 30 years of culture should be thrown on your lap. Thank you.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to go back to the issue of the $271,000, which has been talked about at length, but I think in the discussion, there's always a fair amount of jargon that I think obscures the issue to the non-CPA or non-auditor types like me. But is that money primarily uncashed checks? And so, you know, I worked for the city, say I had a summer job, you know, I went away to school, my last check came in the mail, my mother threw it in the drawer. It never, you know, we never found it.
Or you washed it in the
Right.
washing machine.
So we've identified, we think, $271,000 of those, right? And that's a problem that's been allowed to accumulate for a number of years, and we're pretty confident in that number. And Mr. McGurl was working on trying to reconcile the actual checks.
Exactly.
And it was tragically killed. So now we brought in this consulting firm. That's what they've done. They've established that as the number. You're waiting for a whole year to go by to make sure that kid didn't find the check, right, and cash it.
Exactly.
Because now we could be down to 270,000 instead of 271, or if there's a big check that went to Mass Electric for 50,000 and they found theirs, it's even less. So that's the reason for the waiting of the year, right? To make sure that you have
Right.
confidence in that number,
Exactly.
that those checks aren't continuing to be cleared, that they're definitely gone, and then at that point, that will be transferred to the general fund, right? So when I mean, it can't go negative, right? Because it's money that we think we paid, right? We paid and no one has claimed. Okay.
And it was from, a lot of these were from before we went on Munis, so we don't even have a trail of them.
Okay.
And was a big piece of it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That $271,000, is that free cash, or should that go back to the state for the unclaimed?
No, we cut those checks, that stays with us.
But those are checks that weren't cashed by people.
Right.
So
We
it
don't
really,
even have a record of the checks. We don't have the check. It's just outstanding check lists, and some of them don't even have like names
right, it could
on
have been someone like Councilor Martin said he worked for the summer, and maybe there was a $15 check, and he just...
Right. Some of the old ones we're closing under tailings. The other ones we're advertising like we legally have to do before we can close them.
Okay, so instead of sending it to the state, you're gonna advertise it.
Right, we don't send them to the state, we keep them internally and do what we need to do legally.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any, Counselor Elliott?
Thank you. I just want to say that I've been here for 15 years, and we had regular discussions. Mr. Sullivan has been to many subcommittee meetings when there was a clerk audit oversight subcommittee. And we had regular meetings. We had meetings every year on these things, on these management letters and findings. So we're not just starting this now. I can just say from my perspective, because I call the meetings and I raise the issues. So it has been a running practice. Maybe it hasn't been the practice in the recent late, but in the past there were meetings, there were regular meetings, at least on an annual basis. And the concerns are to address these material weaknesses. And they're weaknesses, and they're cited as weaknesses because there are problems in the way the system is being managed. Otherwise, the independent audit is not going to cite these. So when it goes from year to year, when we're looking at vendor payroll and main depository accounts were not reconciled, outstanding checks, that's just one issue. Let's not red herring it. It's an issue. But other account reconciliations, I mean, there are some concerns here, and we need to work through them. But, I mean, a material weakness is significant enough that has to be cited, and it's a weakness. It's a problem. It's a problem that needs to be addressed. And that's why I raised it, and I was asking questions about it. So, the questions about, why are we bringing this up? They've always been brought up. I can say for myself, they've always been brought up. So, thank you.
Councilman Mendonça?
Well, I believe that this is one that's now resolved. That's what's been reported. And that the treasurer is our own treasurer is doing a reconciliation since Heath and Melanson has set that line in the sand on June 30th, 2011. And going forward, well, there was a couple of months other people were involved, but since we've had the new treasurer, we're now up to date through the end of March. Everything is reconciled. And it looks like as we go through the end of the fiscal year, and continues to be so, then Mr. Sullivan, and when he does the FY 212 report, will indicate that it's finally resolved. After many, many years, in FY 2012, this issue has been resolved. That's what I anticipate it will be. And I'll be very upset if it's not come when we get the report for FY 212, because that's what we're being told for several months now, and there's no indication to the contrary. So although it's been an issue for many years, we finally resolved it, and I think that's the biggest point going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Mayor, just to echo Councilman Mendonca's comments, and also make a comment to Councilor Elliott, it does appear that this long-standing issue has been resolved, and I can only speak to the issues that have arisen since I came on as city manager in 2006, in August of 2006, and I recall the management letter that we brought forward at that time, and at that point, I believe it was the 2005 management letter that we started looking at and finding these weaknesses. In reality, as Councilor Elliott pointed out, and he mentioned his being on the council for 15 years, I have the 1999 management letter, and that cash reconciliation issue goes back to 1999. So this has been a long-standing problem, and I haven't been able to find any documentation of what the council did or said back in 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005. I know that this administration, in working with then Auditor Fernandez and then subsequently Auditor Wright, have worked to solve this problem. Of course, we depended upon our treasurer, Mr. Rosengard, and then Mr. McGurl to try to iron this out. But it does, as Councilor Elliott points out, this does go back many years, going back all the way to at least 1999. So it has been a long-standing problem. I'm happy to see that we finally were able to resolve that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on item number 1? Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. Well, Mr. Manager, you really haven't done anything. I mean, the council took the bull by the horns and brought this issue forward. You've been here since '06. We finally just got to it in 2011. And
Well,
the way that
I'll
you...
disagree with that,
Excuse me,
Counselor.
Mr. Manager, I didn't interrupt you. So the way that it was resolved, that we had to spend an additional $55,000 at best guess, because we still don't know, because you haven't told us, to resolve the problem. So you didn't really do anything. You continued to let it fester, if you will, because it continued to get worse. So I'm not sure what your point is, but we certainly brought it up. I mean, we'll have to get the minutes if you want to see that we did raise them, that we continue to bring them up. I don't know what written documentation you have given to the city council that, under your administration, that you have taken, that, I mean, it was clearly cited when you came on here, and nothing has been done, and nothing was done for 5 years up to last year that I can gather, because I haven't seen any written documentation. I just want to respond a little bit, because I think your notion is that nothing has been done or discussed, and that's unequivocally not the case. It's been, we had meetings. I haven't been the chair of the Clerk Oversight Subcommittee, but when I was, we did call regular meetings. We had regular discussions about this and other issues. So I just wanted to clear the air just a little bit. It is an ongoing problem. It's been an ongoing problem with your administration as well, and it's being solved now. And unfortunately, it costs the taxpayers over $55,000 to try to correct it. And we still will never know exactly what happened.
If I may, Counselor, and I won't belabor the point, but it has been it's again in the management letters going all the way back to 1999. I can tell you, in looking briefly at the management letters from 2000 on to 2006, management made no responses in the management letters to the issue of cash reconciliation, which seems indicative that the city council didn't actually say anything to management about those cash reconciliation issues. It was in 2006 that we began trying to take hold of the issue. We didn't need the council to tell us to take hold of the issue. It was a prime assignment given to Mr. Rosengard. It was a prime assignment given to Mr. McGurl, and certainly our new treasurer, along with Melanson and Heath, which finally we had to do because we just couldn't wait any longer to solve this problem. But it is solved. It will be out of the management letter next year, and I'm happy to say that that's the case.
You know, Mr. Manager, just to let you know, I was a city council. I wasn't the manager, so there's nothing that I could do about that. But I can tell you, as a city councilor, I did my job. And I don't know what you mean by what is indicative or not indicative, but maybe you have some information that you don't want to share with us. But what I can tell you, it's been a long-standing problem, and every opportunity that I had to make a statement and to come up with a solution and make a point to address it, I did. I didn't wait, and I wasn't the manager. I can't say the same for you. You waited until it became a major problem, until this city council brought it up when we received management letters.
Again, we'll disagree with that, Council.
Any further questions for the city auditor or Mr. Powers, Mr. Sullivan? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept as a report of progress. So moved by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Mercia. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. And thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for attending, as well as the manager. The next item on the agenda is the goals and objectives for fiscal year 2013. Madam Auditor.
You have before you the goals and objectives as submitted, the draft for the 2013 budget. Obviously, the audit department's goals and objectives need to be consistent with the city's and the managers and the city council's goals and objectives, and mine support all of those goals and objectives. I don't know if you want to go through the overview. It's just the overview of the department. The auditor's department processes and records all the financial transactions of the city. It safeguards and monitors the financial resources of the city and coordinates the annual outside audit. Audit also provides checks and balances with other financial departments such as the assessors and treasurer's office. We're responsible for payroll, for processing weekly payrolls for all employees, including deductions, W-2 federal and state reporting, and the reporting of sick, vacation, and personal time accruals. Accounts payable, the department reviews contracts, purchase orders, and invoices, and processes all the payments by the city. The auditor's office, along with the finance department, implements recommendations made by the city's outside auditors through the annual management letter. It also prepares various reports and analysis for the state and other governmental units. Finally, the city lists the assets, list of assets are maintained by auditing. I don't know if you want to go through the workload indicators. They're again on the goals and objectives.
I might suggest that maybe we discuss the 4 departmental goals and then get input from the council on any other goals that they'd like.
Absolutely. There's 4 goals. They're not in necessarily by any order. The first goal would be auditing payroll and vendor processing. It's performance, efficiency, and effectiveness indicator. We currently process approximately, I'll just use the 11 numbers so I won't have to go through all of them. Process 32,121 invoices per year. We process 20,549 vendor checks per year, and the number of payroll checks and advices are 182,107 in 2011. Our goal is to efficiently run weekly vendor and/or bi-weekly payroll checks, consolidation of purchases and payments, and working towards bi-weekly payroll by inserting language into all labor contracts. We're currently working on migrating employee insurances to new carriers. We can discuss them all, or do you want to do them one at a time? Okay. Financial oversight. This is another performance effectiveness efficiency goal. It allows management to accurately control and project city finances in an efficient manner. We provide financial oversight for the city's accounting system to assure that all transactions are recorded timely and accurately. We have to test the new Munis upgrade from 7.5 to 9.3 within this year. We book at least 90% of all adjustments within 1 day of approval, and we post the budget the first week in July. In 2011, we made 858 budget adjustments. We made 699 general journal adjustments, and we approved 7,286 requisitions. The next one is cash control. The data source of the department receipts and the treasury turnovers. It's to allow management to accurately control and project the city's finances in an efficient manner to reduce the risk of fraud. We randomly test department receipts versus treasury turnovers. We conduct site visits to all departments that handle cash to determine if proper internal controls are in place and they're abiding by our city policies. We continue to work with the Treasury to streamline the cash reconciliation, and we have new cash receipts have been purchased by departments that include the city seal and department name. This is the reporting of the quarterly reports to you. Obviously, the 2012 estimate is 3 quarters because we didn't put it through until the 2nd quarter, and the target is 4 quarters for next year. And the final goal is auditing management letter, audit, and Schedule A. Our goal is to complete Schedule A by October 31st of every year, complete the financial audit by December 31st of every year, and to complete the single audit and management letter soon after the financial audit. It's to strengthen internal controls and enhance operating efficiency for the Department of Revenue reports and for the rating agencies. The strategy is to work with all city departments using the management letters, comments, and suggestions, and continue to work with the Treasury to streamline cash reconciliation.
Thank you. Any discussion on these goals or suggestions for others? Councilor Broderick.
Excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor. At this point, I might suggest that this seems pretty inclusive and extensive to me. If maybe we give the council a week or two to go through them a little more thoroughly and see if there's any suggestions that we could maybe submit separately to be incorporated and maybe voted on before next. We won't meet for 3 months in this forum, but maybe in 3 or 4 weeks we could take it up as a separate item at a regular council meeting and approve them. I'd just like an opportunity to go through it in a little bit more detail. I don't know as if I necessarily have anything to add, but it might give us folks an opportunity to do that.
Sure. That makes
Second
sense.
the motion.
Motion by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Councilor Mercier?
I actually didn't raise my hand, but I must have that look on my face of questioning, because I don't know what this means, Cheryl. A management letter indicator, management comments. In 2008, there were 18. There were 4 in 2012, and the target is 0. What are we meaning by that?
We were management letter comments that we were talking about in the management letter. It started out as 18 in 2008, and we're working our way down. In 11, 7 were left.
All
I'm
right.
estimating 4 for 12.
I see what you mean. Thank you. I just didn't quite get it.
Zero's my target.
There you go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any comments? Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Auditor, on, I guess, type of indicator performance, efficiency, effectiveness, can you explain consolidation of purchase and payments? How would you do that? What do you mean by that?
What we're doing is, if we have 20 payments to one vendor, we're
Right.
making sure they put it all on one sheet. And even though all the invoices are listed, we're cutting one check.
Right.
We're not cutting 20 checks.
Right.
So any consolidation we can do to make our job easier and to make us more efficient is what we're aiming at. Again, we've gone from 10 employees to 8 employees.
Right. No, I think that's a good idea, but I
And we're
guess...
trying to be, as much bang for our buck as we can get.
Right, but there's also the Prompt Payment Act that requires
Oh, we're not
municipalities to
stalling.
pay vendors in, I think it's 10 days. I believe it's 10 days, or 30 at the maximum, depending upon...
That's construction, 10 days. We do a check run once a week.
Okay. No, and I
When I
agree, we
first
don't
got
wanna-
here, we did a check run once a month.
So, I mean, if you have, like, do you have a blanket purchase agreement, and that's how you do it, where people go to a particular vendor, and, I mean, I don't know, I'll just take an example of the painters. They go to the, once a week or twice a week. Is that what you mean? You're gonna consolidate those types of payments in
Correct.
one? Okay, right.
Into one check instead of sending out individual checks and list all the invoices.
Okay, thank you. So working the biweekly payroll, are there still some contracts that don't have biweekly?
I don't believe that the school has signed on to
Oh,
that
okay.
yet.
So that's what you mean,
But that's a
working
goal,
towards?
and that's a goal that I can't fulfill, but that's a goal that I want.
Right, right. And so that's almost half of the, payrolls. You still have to cut it every week, correct?
Right.
For them?
Yeah, we're still cutting everything every week. And it's almost like an all or nothing, the way the payroll system is set up. So that's
Right.
why it's like,
Right.
if we could do that, we could do a lot more things with payroll.
And just lastly, can you just explain what you mean, migrate employee insurances to new carriers? What is,
Well, everybody's signing up effective July 1st for the new
right,
GIC. We have to do a change on everybody's record to change that. So we're migrating all the insurance carriers for all the payroll. Yeah.
how much time is it, I'm just curious, just say one employee, how much time does that, a lot, okay.
Yeah.
Can you explain
Well,
it?
the problem is, with doing weekly payroll, we are under the gun like you wouldn't believe. We're going to have a matter of 2 to 3 days maximum to change the entire city.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's, you know, it's a big thing, you know, because I have 3 payroll people, and we're going to be all data entry.
No, I don't disagree, that's why I did have the question, but
I know the one little line, it's a lot,
it's a
actually.
lot of work. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Madam Auditor.
Counselor Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You were saying the school department still is weekly,
We're all still weekly.
but they're the only ones who
I don't
haven't
believe that
signed
they've
on.
signed off.
I believe the contract they signed runs out in June. So hopefully, we don't negotiate with the school department here with the council. Well, the mayor does.
It's one of my goals, okay?
Well, let's bring that forward in
My
June
best.
and help a little bit. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Counselor Mendoza.
Yeah, I'm just, as I look at some of these, obviously, a lot of the work in the auditor's department is you do what you have to do.
Right.
That's the biggest part of it. You have to do payroll. You have to check on the invoices versus purchase orders, et cetera. But as I go through these goals and targets, one thing I'd like to see is it needs to be measurable. And some of these are, you have how many you do now, you want to consolidate, generally reduce how many you handled, leaving more time to do other things by the people who do these things.
Exactly.
And so long as for each of these we can put a stake in the ground, this is what we do now, and then we have some improvement, what's the goal?
The problem is, you know, vendor processing, it depends on what we get in for revenues, how many grants that we get in. We can consolidate all we want, but when ARA funds came in, naturally invoices are going to go up.
Yes.
So a lot of these, I'm just measuring it in, you can't really have a goal. It's just to do it as fast as you can, efficiently as you can, and efficiently as you can.
Well, that kind of gets to my point, which is,
Right.
whatever it is we're going to put as a goal, we need to be able to measure it at some point as you're trying to reach point Y, did we or did we not?
Right.
Now,
Well, it's like
some
the
of it, we're going to have to take into account that the volume increased.
Correct.
But if we can't measure it, then we can't know if there was success or not. The item about the biweekly checks, I would probably not have that as a goal until it's something you can do. So although it's something desirable, if you're not going to be able to do it until all the contracts include the language, then you're just not going to be able to do it. Now, once that happens, then it becomes a goal to actually transition to the biweekly payroll system, and you have that efficiency. But right now, if we put it as a goal and there's a contract without the language, it's not going to happen. Or if it does, it's only on the city side once we have all of those. So either have some qualifier, are we going to proceed with this? Having it there as a goal means that at the end of the year, if that contract language doesn't change, it doesn't get done, so you've failed to do that. And that's the only point I make, is for some of these things like that.
It's tough
That-
in my
yeah.
office,
Yeah.
because we process what we get, It's hard to set a goal. Stop sending invoices so my numbers look good. I mean, you can't do that.
Exactly. Well, some of them you just can't. So I'm just wondering, is there anything you can look at in the office where you can have an effect that might improve the operation, that could be a goal and could be measurable? As I look at these, a lot of these are not within the department's control, like you said.
Right.
The volume can change if we decide to buy a lot of things all of a sudden.
Right.
You got a lot more invoices and stuff like that to process. Now, what'll happen is you'll see that with the same number of people, you processed all of them. So in a sense, you increase the workload. We're still able to successfully
Well, and that's
process
really
all
what
of
has
them.
been done, because we've gone from 10. And actually, I said I had looked at my job description, and the job description said that I'd supervise a staff of 13. I now have 7, so
That's
I guess
understood.
I've become
So,
more
all I'm
efficient and
pointing out is-
effective.
All I'm pointing out is that for this process to work,
Right.
these just need to be measurable. And so some of them may need to be reworked, that if they're not measurable, then they're probably not an appropriate goal or or a target, per se. And maybe add something else, or if you can't come up with a measurable goal that we can see the improvement some way, then it's probably not an appropriate goal or target either. So just think we need to revisit some of these.
Thank you, Council. Any further discussion on this item? Motion to accept this report of progress by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Next, we have a discussion regarding the monthly reports pursuant to Section 44 of the City Charter. Madam
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Kennedy.
I just wanted to, as I think probably most people know, the older part of the city charter indicates that the auditor is supposed to give monthly reports, and that those reports be posted in the library and also published in the local newspapers, plural. And I'm not looking for any of that. But what I do think would be helpful is if we could get a bi-monthly report that would indicate how much departments have spent down, and also whether any grant money or anything came into any, was infused into any departments as we go through the year. And that's really all I'm looking for. I think it would be really helpful to know, to be able to see every 2 months how much departments have spent down, particularly, for instance, snow plowing. There was budgeted, I think, for FY12, 1.2 or 1.25 for snow plowing. And I was amazed to find out that we had spent $750,000, more than $750,000, and so that most of that account was depleted, even though there had been very little snow over the winter. And what I did not consider, and what was pointed out to me later, was the big October storm. But anyways, that type of information I think would be good to have as we kind of go along. And I don't know, it'd probably be helpful if we could have it for these upcoming budget deliberations, but I would be happy if we could have it at the, going into the new fiscal year. And that's what that's all about.
Madam
So can we do that?
Madam Auditor.
Sure. Are you saying weekly, are you saying every other week?
Bi-monthly.
Bi-monthly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Every 2 months?
yeah,
Instead of every quarter?
yes.
Okay.
6 times a year,
That's easy. That's fine.
okay.
Although, I don't know, you might not want all the grants. We've got 700 grants. You're gonna end up with a report that's gonna be about this big. I'm thinking maybe just the
Well,
general
I'm
fund.
looking for a summary that's this big, that's maybe 3 or 4
Yeah,
pages.
okay.
Yep.
It's like, I don't, like, too much information sometimes. If you want to sit down, we can go through them all, but I don't think
I
every
guess,
other-
when I mentioned the grants, I just meant if a grant came in October, we maybe wouldn't remain cognizant of it throughout the rest of the year. So if we'd be reminded if it was in.
Yeah, all
included in
grants
your
are in
report.
funds, okay, so they all have separate funds,
Yeah,
and they have balances that go forward and stuff like that, kind of like the Health Benefit Trust, it'll be something like that,
okay.
okay?
That'd be good.
So,
Councilor Broderick and then Councilor Martin.
I support getting bi-monthly or quarterly, whatever it is, because we're going to meet every quarter anyway, so I think it's close to our meeting, it would be good. Excuse me, but I also would suggest maybe we get an opinion from the solicitor as to if we need to do anything to change the rule, if we are in fact, or I don't know, but the section of the charter, I don't know if we're in compliance or not, or if something should be done. But now that's been brought to our attention, maybe we ought to take a look at that, see if there's anything we need to do there. That would be not for you, Madam Auditor, but maybe if we refer that to the city solicitor in terms of if there's anything we need to do. That's all.
Motion to refer
I'll make that in the form of a motion, refer that to the city solicitor to see if there's any action we should be taking.
Sure. Motion by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
So voted. Comments or?
No, I was just looking, your office sent this out today. I was a little puzzled with section 44, and section 45 came with it, which isn't on a docket to speak about tonight. But, you know, I don't know where you found these. How old are these?
Oh, the
Yeah.
1921, I think?
We skimming the Bible next to find things? I mean, geez, I'm looking at this.
So,
I mean, if you look at the next one, you're supposed to talk about the price of gas, electricity,
Not tonight.
you know?
wait a minute.
Councilor Martin?
Yeah, I support the request to get these things twice a month. My only comment, I think Mr. Moses is providing quarterly reports now, which, you know, if yours aren't gonna, that means yours wouldn't completely jibe with his, which is maybe a good thing, you know, that, you know, we're supposed to have an independent look at what he's providing, so this might, it might be worthwhile, so it's fine.
Thank you. Councilor Mercia?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How did this third item get on this agenda this evening? Where did this come from?
Councilor Kennedy requested that it be placed on the agenda.
Okay, so in other words, if we had any issue, we could have called you up and you could have
Oh, sure.
put it on this agenda?
There's an open invitation to submit any requests for,
Well, I would
to be
appreciate that
discussed.
next time someone thinks to want to put something on here, that they would share that information with us in advance to know what Chapter 44 was. I had no idea what we were talking about, Section 44 or whatever. I think out of respect and courtesy for this council, we should have got an idea as to what we were talking about before it actually came before us. Thank you.
sure. Councilor Broderick?
Thank you. Excuse me. Along those lines, excuse me, I had a question just in general in terms of how the agendas are going to work. We've been through the cycle now of all three employees, almost through the cycle. And I had a similar question as, okay, are these getting on by people submitting motions? Are we going to have a set agenda or sections for each employee where councilors can submit motions? Or are we expecting that things are going to be referred by the entire body over the course of the quarter, you know, quarterly reports, bi-monthly reports that are going to get referred? I think there's some confusion in terms of how does something get on here and what are we supposed to, you know, what are we supposed to be doing? So I don't know if now would be a good time to bring that up. I agree, and I think we talked about if we have something we want to put on, send it to the mayor. But that's different than the usual process of sending it to the clerk. And I think a couple times I've looked and said, geez, what is this about? How'd this get on here? So I think maybe it might be worth spending 2 minutes to figure out what the process is so everybody knows. That's all. Thank you.
I think it'd probably be best to submit motions, you know, request the auditor to do whatever in, you know, prior meetings. And then people have an idea of what the actual request is, and then we can discuss them during these or any other time. But in the same way that we would, you know, make a motion to request the city manager to do something, you know, week in, week out, I think that would make sense. The request came late last week, and, you know, I think as I've said before, that anybody's, you know, welcome to make suggestions for what they would like to see on the agenda. Councilor Broderick.
It may be by way of suggestion, then we should have a notation on here that it's coming through a counselor, because when I look at this, it looks like this is an agenda set somewhere, and I'm not sure where, and I think it might be helpful if we look and say, oh, Councilor Kenny wants to discuss, or, you know, Councilor Broderick, or something, so we know we know it's a motion, not some type of set report, because I was wondering if there was some report we had on this, or if there's something, but I understand what Councilor Mercy is saying, because it's new and it's a little bit, can be a little bit confusing. Thank you.
Sure. Councilor Kennedy and then Councilor Mercia.
Yeah, I submitted this and actually the fourth one through the clerk's office rather than through you, and then we discussed it. But that was my understanding of how these meetings were supposed to work, is that if you had meetings, if you had issues or items that were that were germane to the auditor or for the clerk or whatever, then you would just put them on the agenda so that, and so really, this discussion, item number 3, really has to do with the monthly reports, and chapter 44 is, that's just part of it, but it was really about having monthly reports or bi-monthly reports.
Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But you knew that, but I didn't know that, and neither did a lot of us here not know that.
I didn't know that you didn't know that. I didn't
Well,
know.
I don't know everything. I know you think I know everything, but I don't. And I just want to comment about the next item that we're going into. Although the 4th item in the Rules Subcommittee, very, very important, but has nothing to do with our city auditor. And we're making her stay here to listen to something that has nothing to do with it. I would suggest that she can leave. If you want to discuss it, I have no quarrel with stay until midnight, if that's what you want to do. But out of fairness to the auditor, this is not right.
Mr. Mayor?
It has nothing to do with her.
Councilor Kennedy.
Yeah. Just as a point of order, you're right, it has nothing to do with the auditor, and if the auditor wants to leave, it's perfectly okay with me. At the last regular meeting that we had, I indicated that the Rules Committee would be on the agenda at the next meeting. At the end of the meeting, the next meeting got canceled.
Which
So-
I didn't support it being canceled.
I understand, I know that.
So you should have said, you should have voted in support of our wishes to
So
come.
Councilor
if
Kennedy.
I promised the mayor that this discussion would be a 30-second discussion, and it's only on the agenda because the council rules have it be that it has to be on the agenda in order that it can be taken up next week. So my intention
I don't
was that
care.
we would have a full discussion next week and a 30-second or 29-second discussion this week.
I would suggest the auditor leave, because it has nothing to do with her, and she's been here long enough. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Just a moment. Councilman Donta.
Before we leave the item 3.
Yeah. We still have.
And not to
an item 3, yeah.
preclude anyone from getting these on paper if they so wish, that's fine, but I would just say that I and anyone else who wants to volunteer for it would prefer to get it electronically so we don't kill any more trees than we have to. And I know you've been able to do that, so I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
These reports that are being
Paper.
requested.
I want
Yeah.
paper.
Thank you.
paper.
Councilor Broderick.
And along those lines, we'll have them electronically, if we could post them after you submit them to the council, if you could post them on the website as well for folks at home.
Sure. Entertain a motion to accept as report of progress by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Laurie. All those in favor, signifying by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you, Madam Auditor, for appearing.
Good job.
And now, Councilor Kennedy, I will hold you
Purple
to your
Heart.
promise.
Yes. Basically, everybody's got a copy of the rules as amended. This is just a formality so that it can be voted on next week. If anybody has any questions, feel free to call me, but I think that the clerk provided everybody with a copy of the rules a couple of weeks ago.
Yes,
And with the changes to that, and that's it.
Oh,
Thank you,
geez,
Counselor.
Very quick.
Motion to accept as a report of progress by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilman Donta. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? So voted. Motion by Councilor Broderick.
Thank you. Real brief, I don't know if I need to suspend the rules, but I wanted to, congratulations are in order. Former Mayor Jim Milanazzo became a grandfather April 20th to Tyler James Durkin, 7 pounds, 11 ounces. Congratulate the Milanazzo and Durkin family. Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
He may not be watching. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilor Broderick, seconded by Councilor Kennedy. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.